Hello. This is Zach Brooks from World Transplant Athletes. If you have a body with a new part, you are a World Transplant Athlete. You can follow us at World Transplant Athletes on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and your social media platform of choice. We have 18 organ recipient athletes from 11 countries, speaking 6 languages around the world, working behind the scenes to make content for you. Today, we're doing a podcast called Friends of World Transplant Athletes to celebrate and support groups anywhere and everywhere that are either led by a transplant recipient or have recipients as their primary central focus. Today, we're speaking with Danny Hiles from Danny Chats, who focuses on transplant recipients and Wilson's disease. So, Danny, welcome to the show.
Hi, Zach. Thanks for having me along.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to talk to you again. So maybe you can tell people out there a little bit about you, where you're from in this world, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so as you know, my name's Danny, and I live in Hertfordshire, which is just outside North London. And yeah, I had my liver transplant in 2019 due to having Wilson's disease, which is a genetic liver condition that I was born with, basically.
So you're one of those lucky people in the world who was born with Wilson's disease, right? You hit the jackpot.
Yeah, it's a very, very rare disease. And my parents both had the gene, so they were carriers, but they didn't have Wilson's themselves. And then, when they came together and they had me, those genes combined, and I was born with Wilson's disease. But obviously,
so tell us about that. So it's a genetic thing. What's the progression of that eventually leads you to needing a liver transplant?
Yeah, so Wilson's disease is where your liver can't process the copper in your blood. So everyone has copper, we have magnesium, we have all these different things, but the liver can't process it. So it starts to build up in the body, which then causes liver failure, scarring of the liver, and it also affects the brain. So you can get serious neurological side effects. For me, I was very, very lucky, and the neurological side effects were at a minimum, but it was mainly the liver that it attacked for me. And like I say, you're born with it, so your body is constantly building up this copper level. You're not excreting it. And eventually you get to a tipping point, which tends to be in the sort of teenage years for most Wilson's disease patients.
Mm-hmm.
And you just end up going downhill very fast. And that's what happened for me. I ended up with acute liver failure, ended up in hospital at 14 years old. And my parents were told that I had days to live if they couldn't find out what it was. So, yeah, it was a very, very tense moment.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we say it's rare. I mean, how rare? Is it just 10 people in the world or a couple thousand kind of thing?
1 in 50 or 500,000.
Okay.
I know there's a big difference between 50 and 500, but
small. Yeah, there's a difference there, but it's rare.
Yeah, it's very rare. I mean, when I was in hospital, I went to a liver specialist. I went to King's College Hospital. And you can tell it was rare because every single doctor wanted to come and have a look at me. It was like they had something special there, and they wanted to find, everyone wanted to see it.
It's so great to get to be the focus of attention, unless you're the rare guy that every doctor absolutely has to see, right?
Yeah. Well, the King's College is it's a student hospital as well, so they have a lot of students there. So it would be very common for me to be sat there and be examined by the doctor, and then have 15 students all do the same thing.
Because you're a good learning case and so forth.
Yeah, definitely a good learning case. And with Wilson's disease as well, you develop this, or some patients develop this thing called Kaiser-Fleischer rings, which is copper rings in the eyes, which I had. So I'd quite often be on the ward, and they'd ask me to go down to the optometrist place, and I'd sit there, and they'd just have doctor after doctor and student after student come in, and just to see this phenomenon, because they've only ever seen it in
Wow.
textbooks. So, uh, it was interesting, but I was quite happy for that because it got me off the ward at the time, and
Okay.
I'd spent quite a bit of time there, so it was nice just to sort of have somewhere different to go.
Yeah, when you were kind of teaching people, I mean, you
Yeah,
yourself were teaching something through your embodied experience. Literally, it was your body had this experience, and you were teaching some folks. Wow, thanks for sharing a little bit more about Wilson's disease. And I know that's important because that was some of the focus of when you launched um, originally your organization. Well, maybe
yeah.
your chats. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Danny Chats.
Yeah, so after my transplant in 2019, I kind of just wanted to connect with other sort of Wilson's disease patients, and especially Wilson's disease patients that had a transplant, because for me it was very, very daunting, as I'm sure it is for every transplant patient, because we don't tend to know any transplant patients. So
No.
I didn't know what my life was going to be like after. I didn't know what would it, how I would react and what the things I could do after a transplant. So it was just, for me, it was just a way of connecting with other Wilson's disease patients and sharing their story as well. Because one of the things with Wilson's disease patients, or Wilson's disease itself, is if it's not caught early enough, then, like I say, you can really, really go downhill fast, and you can end up with severe neurological problems. Some people can't talk. They lose
Wow.
their ability to feed themselves. They get severe tremors. And for me, I went into acute liver failure, and it was very lucky that they caught me. So one of the other reasons that I wanted to do this was just to share and highlight Wilson's disease as something that doctors should be looking out for.
Hmm.
Because I spoke to one patient, and the doctor said to him, he brought it up. He said, "What about Wilson's disease? Maybe I've got that." And the doctor said to him, "No, no, that's ridiculous. It's so rare. You probably don't have that." It seems mad to me, and he did have Wilson's disease. So for me, it was the two reasons were to highlight Wilson's disease and spread some awareness about it, and just for me to connect with other patients.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're doing. I mean, you're doing a work, a fair amount of transplant recipients out there who, after this experience, want to connect with others, just to kind of validate themselves, because so many of us live these very lonely existences during
Yeah,
our diagnosis and treatment and the
yeah,
rest of it. But your work is, I think, even more challenging because of the rarity of it, and because of the rarity of it, you have examples like that doctor who just dismissed the suggestion out of hand that this could have been Wilson's disease. So, where do you find the strength to do that, Danny? Because that's a fair amount of work you're doing, more than just the average, advocate out there.
yeah. It was kind of like on a selfish personal level, in the fact that I wanted to have these discussions with other people. So, and then in my head, I was like, well, if I want to have these discussions, surely other people want to have these discussions, or they want to know some of the answers that I find out. So it was just, it was easy for me to approach people and say, "Do you want to record a podcast?" rather than just message them and be like, "Can you tell me about your life?" People
Okay.
seem to be, quite happy to share their story. So yeah, for me, it was like a selfish reason, in the fact that I wanted to know.
Okay.
And if I was having these discussions, I just thought, well, I might as well record them and put them on YouTube, because then they're there forever. And if anyone ever is in that situation like I was, they can just go online, they can type in Wilson's disease, liver transplant, and hopefully them chats will pop up. And they can see, because I've talked to people that did have severe neurological side effects, and
Yeah.
they've had to reteach themselves how to control their hands to eat, and everything
Wow.
like that. But it's doable. People have done it. So yeah, it was those two reasons. And then when you start doing podcasts and you get some nice feedback, and you like you say, if you just get feedback from one person who says this is beneficial, then it kind of inspires you to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I'm sort of curious now about Wilson's disease. This is one of my first serious exposures to it. So what are the better treatment options? Because it sounds like the earlier someone knows about it, like so many things in life, the better the treatment options. Because some of those folks who had complications later, had they been found out earlier, they probably could have avoided some of that. So what's kind of being done in trying to go back and, go earlier in the progression to figure out what's going on with folks so they have more outcomes that are better for them?
I think it's just to try and raise awareness, really, in
Okay.
terms of putting it into the doctor's mind that that's something that they should be testing for. But in terms of the actual treatment for Wilson's disease, it's really sort of developing quite a lot and quite fast at the moment. For me, it was just a case of taking medication, and the medication helps your body take up that copper, and helps you excrete it. So for me, once I was on that medication, my life, after a year or so, my life sort of went back to a level playing field again. So I went from severe illness to going back. I was able to travel. I went to university, and everything like that. And then the other option is a liver transplant, which they did suggest at the time, but because I was so young and a liver transplant scared me, I wanted to try the meds, which I was really pleased with. But if you have a liver transplant, you're effectively cured, because although it's a genetic disease, it's just in the liver. So when you get a
Yeah.
new liver, it's gone, it's clear, which is incredible.
Got it. Thank you for sharing some of those details. So how long have you been doing Danny Chats now?
I started at the end of 2019, so it was kind of a coronavirus lockdown project as well, because
Okay.
we were all stuck at home, and that was another reason I think people were happy to come on the podcast, because they had nothing to do. They hadn't spoken to anyone for a long time. We were all
Yeah.
stuck at home, so yeah, it was just people were free during the day, so it was a very easy thing to get them to come on board and do it.
You're doing some
And
live
then
therapy with each other.
yeah, it was just a really nice way of connecting with people. And then after I spoke to Wilson's disease patients, and I spoke to a few liver transplant patients, when you're on social media, you start seeing all these other stories, and I started seeing people that had lung transplants and heart transplants and kidney transplants. And then I kind of reached out to those people as well, because I wanted to hear their stories, and I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of compare that with mine and see how different a lung transplant was to a heart transplant and to a liver transplant, and just to sort of compare these stories, and also just to be able to put that out there for other people that were in that situation. If you're having a heart transplant, you can come on the Danny Chats podcast, you can find it, and you'll find loads of other people that have had the same operation. And just hopefully spread a bit of sort of positivity as such.
Yeah, thank you. I've done this a fair amount as well, but I'm really curious about your observations, having interviewed, what you told me before the podcast began, 30 some people. What are your
Yeah.
observations between people who've received liver versus heart versus other things? Do you have any sort of observations that you've seen?
Um, the one thing that I kind of noticed in all transplant patients, whether it's liver, lungs, or heart, is that everyone's journey is different. So it's the same operation for some people, but their journey is different. Some people went into the operating theatre whilst in a coma. They were very, very ill. Other people, kind of like me, I was able to walk into the theatre. I was able to keep myself fit and healthy and active before my transplant, which really helped after the transplant. So yeah, I mean, although we find similarities, the main thing I kind of learned was that everyone's journey is different, and although it's good to have these people that you can connect with and see their story, it's very important to realize that your journey is your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something I've certainly learned. I mean, people asked me, I've had 2 transplants, and people asked me, asked me, so, what did you learn? Did you get all this new perspective and so forth? And it took me a long time to actually figure out what that meant for me. I kind of was bothered when people would say, oh, you got this new perspective. It's like, well, I had to go through this bad experience to to have this perspective or whatever. But one of the things I really figured out, and this is kind of related to what you just said, Danny, is that in talking to enough other recipients, I appreciated how every story is very, very unique and different. And I really started to learn how to listen well and listen with a lot of openness and empathy for any person, even if they're next to me. And even if their situation was better than mine or worse, it didn't matter. And whatever their background was, male, female, older, younger, any ethnicity, I really learned to listen, because once you start hearing a few of these stories, they unfold in such remarkable complexity and brilliance. So you can't help but just be completely glued to every detail of someone's story and think, wow, that's fascinating. And eventually you learned what you kind of shared, that everyone's story is so remarkably different. Have you noticed anything in terms of how people talk about their transplants that's different? Talking to people with, uh, lungs versus heart versus liver?
Um, Not really different. I think the common theme with everyone is they're just super grateful, super grateful to have a second chance. Um,
Yeah.
I think because it is different for everyone. I think, some for me, I've been very lucky. So I've had my transplant, and for me, it was a cure as such. I'm still on the immunosuppressants, and obviously they have their side effects. But for me, I'm on less meds than I was before. My life's way better than it was before. My clarity is better. And I know for some people that that's not true. They were very
Yeah.
fit before. So they have this transplant and they're still kind of struggling a bit. They're still, getting used to taking meds. Maybe they never took meds before at all. So, for everyone, it is very different. And, I know you said about people saying, "Oh, you have this new perspective on life. You should be very grateful."
Yeah.
We should be grateful, but at the same time, some people have had their lives turned completely upside down because of it. So if they're not full of sort of gratitude, or they don't seem like they're full of gratitude, I totally understand. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks for
because
sharing that. Yeah. We're kind of sharing, but thanks for sharing that, because I think it's important if someone is before a transplant process, realizing, first of all, this is a treatment, not a cure, and your life will be better, but it doesn't mean your life will be without complications afterwards. And I think that's one thing people from the outside might think, is that, oh, you're completely better now. It's like, well,
yeah,
maybe, or your life is just better, but it can be additionally complex, because
yeah.
you might still visit the doctor and the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, say for lung transplants, I know people that had to carry around gas tanks with them all the time. So now they're free and able to enjoy life without those, but then they've got still, the immunosuppressants, and they might have a few other different issues. So, it's such a journey for each person. And that's what, like I said, that's what I've learned with my podcast, is every story is completely different. Although
Mhm.
the transplants might be the same, the stories are different. And it's to take everyone on on face value and how they feel, and not sort of project on how they should feel. Just because I've talked to one person that had lung transplant and they're the happiest they've ever been, it doesn't mean that the next person that I talk to who's had a lung transplant is going to feel that way and should feel that way. They should just feel how they feel, because we're all individuals and that's how it is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, you have some really sort of deep insights about individual, and how to express empathy in that level. So how, and this is maybe slightly off topic, one more time. So how do you think you've been transformed, not only through the transplant, you said you're able to go to university and do some other things, but through your podcasts?
Um, well, to
How,
start off
or
with
how are
my
you transforming? Maybe it's just a process, not a completed product.
Yeah, in terms of my transplant, because I was born with this genetic disease and I lived with it for so long, I kind of didn't really know how ill I was until after my transplant.
Uh,
And then I had my transplant, and then I'm like, oh my God, my brain is just not foggy. I've got clarity. I've got energy to, implement all the actions that I wanted, because I remember being in a past relationship, and the person said to me, that said, you're you don't have the work ethic that you think you do. So I had all
uh,
these ideas, but I just didn't have the energy and the clarity to do it. So, I've had that transplant, and I woke up like, this is my second life. And, this is like, I'm like, wow, this is what, I don't like the term, but this is what normal people feel like. They wake up in the morning and they're not fully just feeling like they need to get back into bed, and they're not struggling through the day. They're not, I was nauseous all the time, but it becomes so normal to me that that was just part of life, and
yeah.
then now I don't have that nausea. And yeah, and then so then things like the transplant games come up, and I was talking to other transplant
Yeah.
patients that had competed in that, and I was looking at them and I was like, well, now I've got the energy, you know, maybe I could do that. So
Yeah.
doing the podcast has definitely expanded my mind to what could be achieved, you know, after transplant.
Yeah, absolutely. And you competed over the summer, right? At the
Yeah.
Transplant Games.
Yeah, it was my first transplant games, and it was just such a good experience. So good, you
Nice.
know.
Yeah, and you got a medal or two out of it. I think two I've seen in pictures or
Yeah, I
something.
got a bronze in swimming and a silver in shot put,
Oh, good
which
on
I
you.
was,
That's
yeah, really, really
awesome.
happy with. I kind of just entered a range of competitions just to go and feel it out, really, just to go and see.
Yeah.
Because when I was at school, I was very, very active, and you know, I was in all the sports teams. I ran for the county. I played football for 2 different teams. It was just my life was sports when I was younger. So
Yeah.
then I got hit with Wilson's disease, and it was at that time where you're developing as a teenager, and I just didn't develop. So I lost my speed. You know, I wasn't as strong as what other teenagers were. All of this. So to have my transplant and then to speak to people like Gillian Best, who's incredible, you know, just to see all these stories, and then I'm like, well, you know, I can do this now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. So one final question is relates kind of to Danny Chat. So what's the main message? And you've kind of shared this in longer format. But if you had to summarize in a short sentence or two, what's the main message for Danny Chats?
The main message would be to take your transplant, you know, as your own transplant. Take each day as it comes. Don't feel pressured to be like anyone else that's had a transplant. Just do your own thing and take inspiration from these other people still, and just see that, you know, anything is possible.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. That's a nice ending. Well, thanks so much for agreeing to share a few minutes with me today for World Transplant Athletes. And for anyone out there, World Transplant Athletes, if you have a body with a new part, you are a World Transplant Athlete. You can follow us all over the web. You can follow Danny. How do they find you, Danny, if they want to find you?
Instagram, Danny Hiles, and I'll be there. Facebook again, Danny Hiles. And yeah, YouTube or any podcast streaming site, just type in Danny Chats and it will come up. I've also got a blog as well, which if you type in Danny Hiles blog in Google, that will pop up there as well. And that's kind of going from, you know, being a child all the way through my Wilson's disease up to transplant, and then a little bit after transplant, really.
Very nice. So they can see a nice progression there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Zach. It's a
You're
great
welcome.
pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Hey, Danny.
Hello, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened. I'm waiting. I'm using something called Restream that a few other guys use, and I'm getting these weird messages. So I don't know what's going on. I have two Wi-Fi's that I use. I'm using the better Wi-Fi. So
You're gone again. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come and say hello. Come here. Come on. Say hello to everyone.
Danny,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm not having some issues over here. It looks like the recording went through, so thank goodness we don't have to redo it. But just wanted to check in with you real quick. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's really good.
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 Yeah, happy to hear that. So thanks for participating. Do you have a hashtag that you use on a regular basis?
Probably just the Danny Chats one.
Let me see if I have
Hashtag
it,
Danny Chats.
because we try to support a lot of the folks out there that we like. So let me find. Um, I have my list of hashtags up, and some we don't use so much. So let me find one of those. I think I'll use this one here. So just Danny, DANNYCHATS.
ATS, yeah.
Okay, got it. So I'm gonna put that into. We'd love if you do the same for us. Put in hashtag World Transplant Athletes when you get a chance on
Yeah,
different
sure.
podcasts and so forth.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Will I be able to share this? So this was on live.
Yeah, this was live. This is going to be on YouTube and on Facebook. If you want, I can send you the recording itself, and you can piece it together in different ways if you like.
No, I just share. I'll just
Just
share
share
your
it.
page when it's on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on. Let me find it. Let me first download where this is. Danny Chance. Here it is. Yeah, it's going to be on YouTube and Facebook. That's usually where I
Yeah.
post these. So, yeah, this service is, you want to try it. Sometimes called Restream. It works pretty well. Philip Jones here from the United States. You might have come across him, a Second Chance, and a guy from Texas. What's his name? Jonathan. Hope with Jonathan. They both use this service. It works pretty well as a podcasting tool.
Yeah.
And then it just immediately populates it there. But before I was using this tool, I used lots of other tools, and they all work very well. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I quite like the way the format of the one that I use, the Skype, because obviously it does it side by side, and then I've got the video saved, and it's just easy for me to edit for
Yeah,
YouTube. Then.
Skype works really well too. So anyway, there's something else I was going to share or ask, but I know what it was. So in terms of this Wilson's disease, so I'm a founder of a startup company, and we have software that helps develop gene editing therapies. And so the things that we come across that we kind of work on are rare disease kind of things. So if you happen to know anyone through your hospital visits that is doing research on or sort of development of very particular gene editing type things for people with Wilson's disease, and you want to make an introduction, then I would appreciate that. If not, that's fine too. But once you started talking about Wilson's disease a little bit more, it kind of just caught my attention because of my other hat that I wear with this company
Yeah.
that I end up running.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, but one of the medicines they've been working on is a gene alter someone's genes basically, so then they don't have Wilson's disease anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a very early stage, but it is
Good.
something that has been talked about.
Good. That's good to hear. Yeah, it makes sense because it sounds like it's just a single gene alteration that creates Wilson's disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it means it's extremely useful for a gene editing type of therapy, because if you just change one thing, and instead of expressing, it doesn't express, and then the body starts doing the rest of it, and then you can take care of most downstream effects. So that's awesome. Okay, good to hear. Very,
Yeah,
very good to hear.
if I speak to anyone at the hospital, any of the people that mention it again, or anyone that gets in contact, I'll put them in contact with you.
Yeah, if you happen to. If you don't, it's fine too. It's just that it would just kind of caught my attention from that perspective. I mean, I have this World Transplant Athletes, and it's very much kind of community based, and really enjoy it as such. But every once in a while, there's a little bit of crossover in terms of medical implications and patient stuff. So anyway, it seems like there's one of the things I wanted to say, but at this point, I might just ramble to try to remember what it was, and it might not be actually important in the end. But it's good to talk to you again. I think we talked twice in the last 2 weeks and get to know you a little bit. So
yeah, I've just been super busy because I run a charity as well, and we put on like music events and raise money for homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
We've had so much going on with that, and with getting my waffle van set up, and I've obviously got a day job as well. So it's just been
What's
busy
your day job,
by
the way?
Just fencing,
Okay.
putting up fencing. I work with my best mate's business, and I'm very
You help him
lucky.
out.
Yeah, very lucky. Help him out, and he's so understanding. If I need a day off to do my van, or some time off to do my van, he's just like, yeah, go and do that.
You're kind of an entrepreneur, aren't you?
Yeah.
I
It's getting that way.
Yeah, no, I can see that with that van. It's awesome. So you're running that throughout the year or mostly in the summer?
Well, we'll be doing it pretty much hopefully all year. I mean, obviously the summer months are going to be a lot busier than the winter months, but winter months you've still got Christmas markets and there's plenty to get on with.
Yeah.
And where I do a lot in music because the charity I run and the life I've had before as a music promoter and stuff, it's got me a lot of connections for bookings in the summer, which is great
Okay.
at festivals and stuff like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. I
Yeah,
hope I get to meet you in person someday if I get over to the UK around London. I have a really good friend up in Cambridge. I mean, you probably met him, Liam, at this point. He's a transplant athlete.
yeah,
Fantastic. I spent a couple days in Cambridge with him back in 2019, I guess, right before the World Games that were in
yeah.
Newcastle, before you came to the scene. They're such an hour away, it sounds like. So it'd be good to meet you in
Yeah,
person someday, get a
yeah.
coffee or
If you
something.
ever come, definitely let me know because I mean we went over to Cambridge recently. Which is only down the road. We went and stayed there for a night. It was really nice.
Yeah, I like it there. It's yeah, I've
Yeah,
been to your country quite a few times at this point, and I appreciate the different parts of the people a little bit different, north to south, east to
yeah,
west, and all
definitely.
that.
It's like two different countries almost. You know,
Yeah, it
we have
is.
this we have this like rivalry between the north and south,
Yeah, the North, I mean, we get some of that in the States between like the South and, some folks from the South, they have kind of
East Coast, West
stereotypes,
Coast.
all those things. And, they
Yeah,
have certain stereotypes and sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not. But it's kind of fun when they are in a charming way. So
yeah,
anyway, I appreciate your country in a lot of ways.
yeah.
So, well, thanks
Well,
so much for taking the time, Danny.
that's no problem. I'm gonna hopefully go to the World Games in Germany, which is 2 years' time, maybe.
Yeah, 2 years time. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to go to Australia. It's going to be a big lift. I don't know how I'm going to be able to manage. And then if I like to go into the World Games, so we can certainly try to meet in Germany in a couple of years. I lived in
yeah.
Berlin before, so I'm looking.
Oh,
I
really?
studied. Well, I studied there. I've lived in Europe at about 5 years of my life or something at this
Oh,
point. So I
wow.
lived in Germany, Sweden, Spain, Ukraine. Been to I don't know 20 or so European countries at this point. So
Was
I'm
that all
looking.
pre-transplant for you?
Um, so the Germany and Spain definitely were. Um, Sweden and Ukraine were after, so two and two. But yeah, there's a point where I thought I would live in Europe the rest of my life. It's tricky when you're not
Really?
European because I really loved it and I had a lot of
Yeah.
connections and so forth. You don't have quite the passport. Let's put it in those easy terms. It's just a little bit harder to make things
Yeah.
work in life,
Yeah.
getting jobs and the rest of it. So now I just travel there as much as I can. And when I'm there, I
Yeah.
usually spend 2-3 months at a time. So I feel extremely happy when I'm in Europe. And that includes almost every country. Every country is different in its own way, but there's enough sort of similarities. I generally am pretty happy there. So
Yeah.
anyway, hopefully we can meet each other in Deutschland in 2 Jahren here. That would be
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, yeah. You can just say yeah,
That's all
yeah,
I
and
know.
people are like, yeah, it's people
Yeah.
know that one. Yeah, yeah. And just kind of nod your head and like, oh, okay, he gets it.
Yeah.
It's the easy entry into Germany. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, well,
Brilliant.
good. Well, we'll stay in touch. Maybe we can do another podcast down the line in some capacity. And we're doing a fair amount of research, kind of work with a guy at Stanford who's a transplant recipient. So as we kind of build our grant capacity and so forth, I might ask you to participate in terms of sharing some expertise about Wilson's disease or something. But anyway, I'll
Yeah.
let you know about that down the road.
Yeah. Always happy to give my time for anything like this.
Okay, thank you, Danny. Well, I'll let you go. I guess the game's on in about 15 minutes. So I'll probably watch it as well.
Yeah. Argentina, Croatia. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be a slugfest.
Yeah. It would be good. I'm kind of hoping for Croatia.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm mixed. I mean, Messi is such a brilliant player. He's mesmerizing to watch, but that goalie almost cost them the game the other day for Argentina.
Yeah.
He was such a jerk when he started. You're up 2-0. It's like you're just inviting the team back into the game at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that moment, I had a hard time even rooting for Argentina. I was really just thinking, you guys are. I mean, except for Messi, a lot of that team are just straight up. I don't know. It's hard to root for them, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm an underdog type of person. So
Yeah. Croatia's
Croatia.
an underdog for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Really hope so.
Croatia or Morocco. They might either one of those. I'd be happy if one of those win the tournament.
They could. They could.
Yeah.
That would be pretty exciting. All
Yeah.
right.
All
Well,
right then, Zach.
have a good evening.
You too. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.